This isn't going to be a normal team travel versus team cashback video that you may have seen in the past. I really wanted to make this video to give y'all insight as to why I play the credit card game like I do, but that title doesn't sound as good on YouTube. But as for what exactly you can expect from this video, first I want to tell y'all my opinions on the difference between team travel and team cashback. And I want to kind of just do that at a high level so that, maybe even by the end of this, you can tell which team you really are more leaning towards. Then in part two, I want to tell y'all my personal reasons for being on team travel, despite the difficulties that come with making that choice. Before we get there though, I just want to set things straight and let y'all know that in making this video, I do not want to just make y'all choose one side versus another. I actually had a comment on one of my recent videos saying that pitting those two sides against each other is probably not the best thing to do. And while I do agree with that in a sense, I'm more just say team travel and team cashback because people just have specific preferences in the credit card game. And depending on what side you lean more towards will drastically change what credit cards you should be getting. So at the end of the day, while all of us are on team credit cards and team rewards in general, I use that verbiage of the two teams because I do think it's an important distinction to make for yourself whenever you try to plan out what your credit card setup is going to look like. Now, the way that I want to tackle part one here is by basically comparing and contrasting the two sides, team travel on one side and team cashback on the other. And I basically just want to go through this bulleted list that I came up with the other day while sitting there thinking about what I wanted to talk about for this video, because I think that these points that I jotted down really do show the difference between the two categories. And if you can understand those differences, then you can obviously understand what cards you should get. Now, for starters, travel credit cards are usually going to be more complicated than cashback credit cards, which are very simple. Now, for one, that goes to the credit cards themselves in those two categories. But the main reason I say that is because of the way that you redeem these points or miles, depending on which route you go. On top of that, being on team travel is very time intensive compared to team cashback, where it's just pretty much set it and forget it. This also goes hand in hand with the ways that you redeem the points because, on team cashback, you really are just earning points or just straight cashback that is easily redeemed to your bank account or as a statement credit or what have you. But whenever you're on team travel, you feel pretty bad if you only get that 1 cent per point valuation that you would get on team cashback normally. So what that forces you to do is do a ton of research up front to see what bookings are going to give you the most value in cent per point form. That leads perfectly into the next difference between these two camps, that being that whenever you're on team travel, your points or miles that you earn have very high intrinsic value depending on how you use them, but the value for those points is kind of unknown until you actually make any travel bookings. But then for team cashback, your redemption value is basically fixed. I say that because cashback credit cards are going to give you a base redemption rate of 1 cent per point technically. And that's only if you're earning points on a card like the Citi Double Cash, Citi Custom Cash, or one of the Chase Freedom cards. Of course, we'll talk about how to increase that redemption value in a little bit, but if you were to only use cards like that as cashback dedicated credit cards, then you're really maxed out at getting 1 cent per point in value for all the points that you earn. Of course, there are other cashback credit cards out there like the Discover It that give you, literal just cashback in return. So you don't even really have any optionality there besides redeeming in a bank account or a statement credit or through a check or something like that. But if you're somebody on team travel, then you really open up the options in which you can redeem your points. Let's take Chase again, for example. If you have a card like the Chase Sapphire Preferred, not only can you actually redeem your points for cashback at a 1 cent per point rate because it's a Chase card, but you can also redeem through their travel portal at a 1.25 cent per point rate, meaning that your points get a 25% boost whenever you use them for travel through Chase's travel portal. But then the real key comes when you transfer your points out to Chase's travel partners, because whenever you do that, you might increase your redemption rate to 2, 3, 5, 10 cents per point if you find the right bookings. So that last part is key right there, if you find the right bookings. That shows again how time intensive team travel is, because to find those right bookings, it takes a lot of time. But you do technically have a lot more upside value in a travel focused setup compared to a cashback setup, at least for your point redemption values. Now, this next bullet might not be one that you agree with completely, but in my opinion, I feel like being on team travel does limit you to a certain few credit cards that you can apply for, at least as compared to cashback, where you can kind of apply for any card you want that earns cashback. So I don't really know if I'm actually saying that if you're on team travel, you have limited options, and if you're on team cashback, you have unlimited options. But the fact of the matter is that if you are on team travel, then you don't necessarily care about earning cashback. So you're only looking at cards that give you points and miles, which of course limits the amount of cards that you can apply for. If you're on team cashback though, you do have more optionality because you can also apply for cards from multiple different lenders. And since they're all just earning cashback, you don't really have to worry about, building out any strategic setups or anything like you might have to do on team travel. For example, if you're on team travel, you might want a setup like the Citi Trifecta, which I made a video about recently, where you have the Citi Double Cash, Citi Custom Cash, and Citi Premier cards. And if you're not a high spender, then you probably want to limit all of your spending to just one point ecosystem, being Citi in this case. But if you're on team cashback, you could get different kinds of cashback cards, like maybe you get the Sabre one from Capital One, you get the Wells Fargo Double Cash from Wells Fargo, and then you get a card like the Chase Freedom Flex from Chase, of course. Now those two setups are very different, but also very valuable depending on what team you're on. However, I will say that another difference between the two is that on team travel, you generally don't apply for cards that also could be used for cashback. But if you're on team cashback, a lot of those cashback cards can be used in combination with travel cards to build a really solid travel setup. So basically what I'm trying to say is that if you're applying for travel cards, that's really what they are. They are travel focused cards and you don't want to redeem the points in any other way. But if you are on team cashback, it's somewhat easy to switch over to team travel by just adding another travel focused card from that lender whose cards you already have some of. A perfect example of this would be like Chase's credit cards. If you're on team cashback, you could very likely have the Chase Freedom Unlimited and Chase Freedom Flex that are both really good cashback credit cards in and of themselves. But if you just added a card like the Chase Sapphire Preferred to that setup, then you'd have a really solid travel setup. But if you started the other way and started with a card like the Chase Sapphire Preferred that is, somewhat dedicated towards travel, the amount of value that you would get from that card having a $95 annual fee is way less than if you would have just gotten a normal cashback credit card with no annual fee that gave you much better earning categories. That may not have been the best example, but let me give you another one. Let's think about the Capital One Venture X. If you're somebody on team cashback, it makes no sense to get the Capital One Venture X because the miles that you earn on that card are only worth half a cent per point in cashback form, which is terrible. But if you're on team travel, then that card makes a ton of sense because you can get a lot of value for those miles, and you also unlock some travel related categories that might be helpful for you. So while some people love that card because they're on team travel, people on team cashback are going to think that's a pretty terrible card for them, and that's just kind of the difference there. Now, I haven't mentioned this yet, but honestly, I'm somebody that's kind of like a hybrid in this. I play mostly on team travel, but I also have some cashback cards. So being in that situation, I need to know which cards to use depending on what kind of points and miles I want to accumulate, and also want to know how to maximize my spend by getting every point I can for every dollar I spend. Now, for me to be able to do this, I personally use an app called Max Rewards. Not only does it tell you what card to use depending on what category you're spending in, but if you're out and about and you're shopping and don't know what card to use at the store you're at, you can pull open Max Rewards and it tells you what card will give you the most rewards at your exact current location. Or if you don't want to carry all of your cards with you at one time, you can actually search for a future location you're going to go to so you know what card to bring. And trust me, while you may think that you have a good grasp on your credit card setup and know what card to use where, at some point you're going to show up to a location where you're not exactly sure how it'll code, and you're going to wish that you had an app like Max Rewards to help you out. Max Rewards also has a paid tier called Max Rewards Gold that not only automatically activates your quarterly rotating categories for you on your cards like your Chase Freedom Flex, but it'll also activate all of your credit card offers for you, which is super helpful. Now, despite the flaws of this app, which their team is constantly working on to try to make it better for us, this is such a powerful tool that I genuinely use on a consistent basis to help me manage my credit cards. So if you're interested in just trying out the free features, be sure to click the link down in my description, and whenever you sign up for the app, enter the promo code Spencer to give you 1 free month of Max Rewards Gold. Thank you so much to Max Rewards for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to that team cashback versus team travel argument. Now, before we were talking about how there are only specific credit cards that you can kind of apply for if you want to be on team travel versus team cashback, but another difference between the two camps is that if you're on team travel, the order in which you apply for credit cards really matters, where on team cashback it doesn't necessarily. As you know, if you're on team travel, a lot of folks recommend that you get started with the Chase trifecta because you want to get your Chase cards first while you're under 524, and then you move on to other lenders that might have stricter application rules like Capital One or US Bank or something like that. And trying to keep all those application rules in mind can get pretty annoying. But if you're on team cashback, a lot of times you're applying for no annual fee credit cards, and like I said earlier, you can kind of mix and match between lenders, and the order in which you apply for those cards doesn't really matter. Of course, you want to apply for the easier to get approved for credit cards first, but there aren't a ton of cashback credit cards that are super hard to get besides maybe from a lender like US Bank. So of course, you do have to at least somewhat think about what order you apply for cashback cards in, but since you can mix and match those so well, it just makes things a little bit easier. One cool thing about being on team cashback too is that you can apply for credit union cards and get a ton of value from those. As somebody on team travel, credit union cards don't really make so much sense for me because they're really cashback focused. I know there are a few exceptions, but for the most part, that's true. So for me, I'm kind of more stuck to the big banks like Chase, Citi, Amex, and Capital One. I just mentioned a second ago too that with cashback credit cards, you're usually applying for cards with no annual fees on them, or maybe really low annual fees. But if you're somebody on team travel, a lot of times if you want to get real value from the credit card game as a person on team travel, you need high annual fee cards. Well, maybe not high annual fee, but you definitely need some with annual fees on them. And with that being the case, if you're on team travel, you might have a harder harder time getting approved for certain cards because they require a higher score to get, those more premium cards. On the opposite end, of course, being on Team Cashback, like I said, a lot of their cards are not super hard to get approved for. So that's another thing you kind of have to weigh. And one of the biggest differences between the two, in my opinion, is obviously how you can redeem, but what you redeem your points for. Whenever I think about how I like to use my credit card points, it's really to better both my life as well as, the people closest to me. So being on Team Travel makes that really easy because if I want to take a trip with my girlfriend, I can better both of our lives by paying for that trip in points. But if I was on Team Cashback only, then the way that I would be able to use my credit card rewards to better both of our lives is by buying material things, which obviously I think is still a really good thing and it's just helpful either way. But if you value those experiences a lot right now, then maybe you want to be on Team Travel compared to Team Cashback. Now let's get into the second part of this video where I tell y'all more about my personal reasons for choosing Team Travel over Team Cashback for the most part. The first reason is because I'm a nerd. So what that means is that I actually have a ton of time to devote to finding the best redemptions and learning about how to maximize my setups based on, different lenders' application rules and stuff like that. But that does not mean that everybody can do that. This is also my full-time job. So while it is a hobby for me, it also is what I do to make money. So keeping up with the times and learning about how to use my points in the best ways is not only beneficial for me in my personal life, but also in my business life. I think that's probably the first thing that you need to understand about yourself before choosing a side on this. Because if you're not somebody that wants to dedicate the time to learning how to use your points in the most effective ways and stuff like that, then obviously Team Travel is not really for you. But for me, that's exactly where I'm supposed to be, I think. Another big reason I'm on Team Travel personally is because, well, I'm young and being on Team Travel actually pushes me to travel. I know it sounds stupid, but honestly, that is a really big reason that I personally am on Team Travel. I don't know about you, but if I didn't have a bunch of cards earning me a bunch of travel miles, I probably would be just fine sitting back and letting my bank account fill up with more money. However, at the same time, I've always said that I want to take more trips and experience more in life while I'm young. So having travel credit cards to help supplement that lifestyle is something that I personally need. What I don't need, on the other hand, is cashback. That does not mean that those cards are wrong for you though. For example, I was actually helping out my mom today with her credit card setup, and at the stage of life she's at, she's probably more leaning towards Team Cashback because of just how simple it is. And we actually just got her approved for the Chase Sapphire Preferred today because she does want to learn a little bit about the travel side of the game, but more for just our family trips that she wants to use her points for, which she can't do right now. So I'm kind of teaching her the basics of it, which is a pretty fun experience. But I think getting to talk to her made me realize that in reality, a lot of people just do not care to learn about Team Travel and are much happier with getting their bills paid off and stuff like that because they have cashback credit cards. I also love specific travel credit cards because of the optionality that they provide for me. As most of y'all know, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that my favorite lender is still Chase. And the reason I say that is because they offer the most optionality out of any lender. That's why the example I gave earlier about the Chase Trifecta might not have been the best example, because even though it's true that the Chase Sapphire Preferred is not a great cashback card, you actually still could use it as a cashback card, which you can't really say for a lot of other lenders. So let me kind of summarize this roundabout thought I'm on right here. What I love about Chase's credit cards in particular is that you can still get a 1 cent per point redemption rate in cashback with any of their ultimate reward point earning cards, but you also are able to build a really solid travel setup as long as you have one of these Sapphire credit cards on the personal side or the Chase Inc. Preferred on the business side. So that means that if sometimes in my life I want to just redeem for cashback, like I did for my MacBook Pro, which I guess wasn't exactly cashback, but just go watch that video if you want to learn more, I can redeem for cashback. But also 90% of the year, if I want to use my points for trips, I can be on Team Travel with them. Really, the only other lender that is full on like that is Citi, which is why I made a full video about the Citi Trifecta, because I do think it's a pretty slept on setup, although I will always value Chase's points more than Citi because of their transfer partners. Another reason I'm on Team Travel is because, let's be honest, it's just more fun and more strategic to play the game that way. As I've said so many times already, if you're on Team Cashback, you probably just want a set it and forget it approach that's super simple. You don't have to think about it. You just get cash in your bank account or as a statement credit, and you just really never have to look at it. But on Team Travel, you have the ability to make some crazy redemptions up to the Maldives if you want to, or you can make domestic trips to cities you've never been before. You can bring your family along with you as somebody on Team Travel. If you have the right credit cards, like with Chase or Citi, for example, you can redeem for cashback whenever you're not traveling as much. So to me, it's just a lot more fun because I can kind of make those setups adapt to my lifestyle at the time. And obviously, it's arguably way more strategic when it comes to especially point redemptions, but even when it comes to building out your credit card setups. cards. I did make a really fun video with RJ Financial about how to build a really good cashback credit card setup, and I honestly might have had more fun building out that setup than I do, normally building out a travel setup, but that's only in regards to the earning categories, because the earning categories on cashback cards are usually a lot more broad than on travel credit cards. So you can build a really cool 10 credit card setup, optimizing every single category possible on a cashback card. But then again, you see a lot of really creative credit card setups coming out of the travel side recently. Like my friends Calby and Anthony have both made videos on the God trifecta, which I know a lot of y'all don't like the name of, but it's still a really cool setup nonetheless right now. And that's a travel specific setup. You also have hotel and airline credit cards under that team travel umbrella, and you can really build a setup that fits your exact travel habits. Now that brings up another point that honestly might need to be covered in a whole separate video, but this whole time I've been talking about a general team travel, when in reality there are multiple teams within team travel itself. You could be on team luxury travel like Luke's Points and Miles or Kevin Yang, for example, or you could be on team domestic travel like my friend Stan the Credit Frog, or I guess really myself at this point, and the cards that you get there will even differ depending on those strategies. Editing me here real quick, I did just want to mention that I say team luxury and team domestic travel here, but in reality when I say team luxury, I'm thinking more team international or aspirational trips compared to like economy domestic trips. I was talking to Stan the Credit Frog about this topic, and he brought up the point that you could be on team luxury travel while also only traveling domestically. So just keep in mind I was talking about more like team international versus domestic, I guess. So as you can see, the rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper on team travel when I could sit here and talk about it forever. But moving on to my next point, I also think that travel credit cards are just cooler and they have better perks. That's obviously a little bit of a vanity thing. Like you don't need your cards to actually look cooler, but in reality, they kind of are. I mean, come on, people, look at this thing. That would have been even cooler if that was actually my credit card, but it's actually one of my subscribers. But aside from them just looking cooler, they do generally have much better benefits than a cashback credit card would. Now, the reason for that is because the cards also have higher annual fees. So to justify those annual fees, they need to give you credits that offset those. And most of the benefits and perks that come on travel credit cards are definitely travel focused. So again, that point's kind of a null point if you're somebody on team cashback, because you don't even want the perks and benefits that come on our travel cards. The real overarching reason for me being on team travel though is because I'm somebody that does value experiences right now more than I do just more money in my bank account. I'm okay with putting in the time and effort to figuring out how to get the most value from my credit cards. So even though I could sit back and relax and just let my credit cards on team cashback just do their thing, I'm actually happy to put in the time and effort to find experiences for myself that I never would have taken if I was on team cashback. I mean, of course, that's not to say that I will never be on team cashback or that I don't use my points for cashback here and there. I mean, again, I redeemed like almost all of my Chase points for this laptop, so I'm definitely on both teams a little bit. But for the most part, I would consider myself on team travel, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think that everybody is going to be a little bit of a mix, and that's kind of the whole point of the credit card game, is to tailor it to how exactly you want to play it. But I wanted to make this video more to show you, I mean, first of all, just my inner thinking about credit cards in general, but also to maybe give you some ideas as to what the other side has to offer for you. If you're somebody that's always been on team travel, you should probably look at cashback credit cards because they might actually fit your spending habits better, as well as just how much time you have to devote to something like the credit card game. But in the end, if you want to hear more about my general credit card strategy with the specific cards I have and what cards I want to add next, then I'd encourage you to go ahead and watch this video next. With all of that being said, as always, Odin and I both want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, and we'll catch you guys next time.